Our brain wants what is easy and familiar, and so when we take on challenges, there's a friction in our brain that oftentimes prevents us from taking action and moving forward, right? But as we take those tiny little steps, the Jacob ladder effect, in a way, it's like it creates a positive feedback loop, and it releases dopamine and serotonin,
Yeah.
and that's momentum, and then we gain confidence, because a lot of people think confidence can be granted, and it can't. Confidence has to be earned.
All right, welcome back to the 1% Bttr Podcast. Today we have on Eric Fischer. Eric, welcome.
How's it going? Thank you for having me on, Chuck. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to, getting into a great conversation with you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. So, a little bit about yourself. Former professional athlete in baseball, transitioned to the film production industry. You were also a performance coach and speaker, and also the host of the Intrinsic Podcast. That's a little bit of my homework, but in your own words, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, that sums it up in I guess, kind of surface level, in a way. I went to Moeller High School, private boys Catholic prep school in Cincinnati, Ohio. King Griffey Jr., Barry Larkin went there, and I was drafted by the Chicago White Sox out of high school. I played. I forewent college, went into pro ball. 5 years, give or take, with the White Sox. 3 surgeries. Got Rule 5'd over to the Minnesota Twins, which, for those who don't know, is basically a money trade inside of the professional game. And after 8 years and 4 surgeries, I was done. In pro ball, you're either an asset or a liability, and I became a liability. So I went from a top prospect to a liability over that span of 8 years, give or take, and owned a small baseball facility in Cincinnati, my hometown, and owned a condo, and was in school at University of Cincinnati. And look, I've only wanted to do 2 things in my life, one of which was play professional baseball, and the other was to get into the film industry. I've always loved movies. And so when I got out of baseball, I had to ask myself a question. You're defined by the game, and I'm 26 years old. So it's like, what's next for me?
Yeah.
And I chose to move to LA. And I enrolled in Cal State, got a couple of degrees in film production with an emphasis in media law, and started producing film. Started out with short films, low budget stuff. And then that incrementally progressed upwards into 7-figure films, and then some partnerships, what we call in the industry are overhead deals, with companies like 3 Point Capital and Palm Star Media Capital. And so over the span of roughly 13 years of producing film, and training athletes and parents and coaches and organizations, I loved it, and then after that, I'd say overall successful chunk of my life, while still coaching athletes. And we moved to Cincinnati. I got married to another filmmaker, and we had 2 daughters, and decided to move back to my hometown. This is before COVID in 2000, roughly 15, 16. And then all hell broke loose in my life. And, I'm in recovery for alcoholism, and I was in a lawsuit, and I shattered a couple discs in my lower back, and there were some mental health issues, some attacks, borderline personality attacks from extended family members. And I quite simply couldn't handle it, and I wasn't man enough to. And that shifted my life at a root level. And I took deep dives into psychology and spirituality and human behavior and philosophy, namely stoicism, and shifted my life, reoriented my life to be a present father. I mean, my whole life has been living out of a suitcase really from a very early age, playing baseball and basketball at a high level and then going into professional baseball and then filmmaking. Every movie I produced, I was on the road, similar to, being an athlete. And it was like, you need to slow down, Eric, and readjust your life and gain some perspective on what you've been through and start to heal. And then that shifted into taking an interest, a profound interest, I'd say, in helping other people overcome their own adversities and setbacks.
Incredible. One, for your vulnerability with putting that out there to everybody and helping them. I think that's one really important thing, but also the navigation from being a professional athlete and then going into a new career, which was similar from a standpoint as you said, going on the road with film production. But with these shifts, I think everybody has these chapters in their lives where they go from one chapter to another, and they're trying to figure out that transition and how they go about it. With you looking back on it, has there been anything that you've taken from that time that you have implemented now into today as a father, as kind of being more present in your life than moving around as much?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I'd say I am I'm rather impulsive, not recklessly impulsive.
Yeah, I
But
think we all are to a degree.
yeah, I mean, that's a big trait too of folks who are addicts, in any way. And then it's like, how do you define addiction? There's alcoholism,
Sure.
there's the drugs, but there's also the purchasing. There's the pornography nowadays, which is really a problem, especially for males. And there's the nutrition element, what it is that we consume. I'd say, I've become what I've learned the most is to lean into my creativity and my my conscientiousness to the point where it's gaining perspective and not living through a lens of unilaterally and subjectively viewing the world as only I see it. And so I think, what I take into being present and raising my daughters is to never give up, to normalize failure because we all fail. And I had to redefine what failure meant because I grew up in a world where it was, if you cry, you're weak, sleep when you're dead. I was surrounded by athletes. My family are all athletes, and the high school I went to and my summers, I was surrounded by these type A males, and it's the gas pedal, with no brake pad. And I had to learn what failure meant because I had failed in the past, but I still had this narrow approach and naive approach of if you don't come in first, you came in last. And
Right. It's very binary, a win-loss mentality, and that's it.
yeah, black and white, and I've learned that the beauty of life is in the gray.
Oh,
And the adventure of life is in the gray, and the only way that we can have a real adventure of life, what I've learned through Jordan Peterson, is is the adventure of life is a great life, and the only way to obtain the adventure of life is to take on the most responsibility that you can voluntarily, because life is about love and sacrifice. Everything we do is sacrificial in nature and goal oriented, and I think a lot of folks don't understand that as they limp around this earth trying to keep their shoes clean.
it's a great way of putting it. You were speaking about creativity, and I have a very creative mindset myself. Something that I've learned through the years about myself is that my creativity kind of flourishes when I'm more disciplined. How does discipline play a factor in what you do and how you go about things now, whether in the past or the present?
Yeah, discipline equals freedom, and that feels counterintuitive.
Big time.
But when you unpack it, if I'm disciplined about my life, when I get up, my habits and routines. So when I get up, when I go to bed, you can't have a great morning without a great evening. same time. It amplifies your sleep. You wake up and you're fresh. That's all discipline. You know, setting aside 5 minutes for some mindfulness early in the morning when nobody else is awake. There's a lot of peace in that to gain clarity and uh, um, set your intentions for the day, the week, the month, and beyond.
Right.
And hitting the gym, saying a little prayer, and getting up and getting moving. You know, all of those elements, making your bed every morning, all of those elements of discipline create a freedom inside of the individual's world, where they understand when it's time to work, play, and rest. And I think that as we truck through life, we become conditioned by external forces that prevent us from play, the spirit of play. And yeah, I think discipline is a key element into creating sustainable freedom in one's life.
Why do you think people struggle with it so much, with being disciplined?
Well, I think that you know, it dates back to it's the neuroscience behind it. I mean, human beings want what is easy. Our brain wants what is easy and familiar, you know? And so when we take on challenges, there's a friction in our brain that oftentimes prevents us from taking action and moving forward, right? But as we take those tiny little steps, the Jacob ladder effect, in a way, it's like it creates a positive feedback loop, and it releases dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah.
And that's momentum, you know, and then we gain confidence, because a lot of people think confidence can be granted, and it can't. Confidence has to be earned, and through experience. Um, and so I feel as though we create, because of the way we've grown up, and through millennia as human beings, at a root level. But then when we're children, we're told not to jump on the bed because it's only for two things: procreating and sleeping. But when we're a kid and we have that spirit of play, well, as a young boy, I might think I'm Superman, and that's a trampoline, and I'm jumping off of it, you know, to do whatever's in my imagination. And throughout the course of life, and we age upwards, we can't act certain ways in public. We have to adhere to what the mandates in the school are, and then we get a job, and we have to adhere to those job expectations, and so we become boxed in.
Yeah,
We become boxed in, and we lose the ability to think for ourselves, and we lose the ability to we lose what it felt like to dream, and therefore we don't take action, and we accept, you know, like Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll steer your path, and you'll call it fate. You know, when somebody wakes up, then they can start living their own life, because then they can start taking those little tiny steps, and that 1% better everyday mentality can be inserted into their bloodstream. But until somebody wakes up, and unfortunately, you know, a lot of us, we don't change until the pain of our current situation is worse than the pain that it's going to take to overcome and heal and wake up. And that was certainly the case for myself. I thought I was awake, but I was not.
Whatever that catalyst is that really causes you to shift or make a drastic change is typically a good thing. For me, it was the brain surgery, but there's always events and things that occur before that. Like for you, baseball, film. There's a lot of things that occur that build up, and then you go through this setback or this life-changing event, but it's all that previous stuff that built you up to that point to be able to get through that on a positive note for the next side of what are you to become. I want to go back to baseball real quick, since I am a sports fanatic and baseball lover as well. Reflecting on your time with the White Sox, the Twins, what were some pivotal moments that really shaped your perspective on the league itself. And then also even what you learned about yourself during that time too, in your 20s, when that is a time that a lot of us are trying to figure out who we are.
Yeah, sure. Wow, yeah, where do I start on that one? It's
Loaded.
I was 18 when I went into professional baseball. I went into a man's world as a boy, and still living in my parents' home, still having my mom do my laundry, like cook my food and everything else. And one thing that was apparent to me immediately was it's a business. We play a sport growing up that we love, and therefore it's not work, right? I love sports. I love baseball, and that's autotelic. That's autotelicity, which is a fancy Greek word for self-purpose, like doing it for the love of doing it, for the sake of doing it. There's no trophy attached to it. There's no proverbial paycheck, none of it. You just go out in your driveway and you shoot hoops, and you imagine playing against Kobe or Jordan or whoever, right? And that's how you improve. And that's how I grew up as a young athlete. And then I get into professional baseball, and it's like, man, they don't care if you sleep on a park bench, just show up and perform. And so your your life opens up into an adult world, a cutthroat world, a performance world at the highest level, because you think you're good as an amateur, and you are. But then you get into professional baseball, and I'm playing with guys from the Dominican, Cuba, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Venezuela. I think I mentioned that, Dominican Republic, and then the Asian market and Australian market. And so you're thrown into this bus with 25 other people, or the plane, because you're on the road all the time. And you start to understand that not everybody came. I came from a very middle class. My parents are still together, Midwestern middle class upbringing. And now my world is starting to open up, and it's sink or swim, asset or liability. And so you really have to redefine what your work ethic is like. And then you're also exposed to, um, you're exposed to the vices. You're exposed to the fake ID, going out to the bars, because I'm playing with guys who are out of college. I'm 18, 19,
Sure.
20 in my first couple years, and playing well, but I'm playing with guys that are 25, 26, 27. They have more life underneath them, inside of them, than I do. And there's a keeping up with the Joneses to it as well. But you really, you learn quickly what the grind and the grit really mean, doing hard things when you don't want to do them, because you won't come back. Next man up.
It's a very, as you said, business world. And I think the very interesting part about what you're speaking about too is, as we're growing up as little kids, it's just a game. There's nothing to it except playing for the love of it. And that's what our aspirations are as we continue to grow, go through the college ranks, go through, if you make it even to college, or even make it to high school, college, or pros. And then you see that it does become a business, and it's almost, I've heard the story from a number of people now at this point. It's almost like smacks you in the face, because it's not what you expected it to be, of that deep rooted love that you had when you were a kid. So it's a wake up call to a degree.
Oh, yeah.
But I would kind of piggyback that and ask you, with your experiences from that, you're now in coaching. Have you taken those experiences through that, or any words of wisdom that really stuck with you? Because I have stuff that stuck with me since I've been was in my teens, 20s, now in my 30s. Has there been things that really stuck with you to this point that you lead with in your coaching that you do now day to day?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that I every person's unique, and
Mm.
so there's not a one size fits all. People have different personality traits, and different obstacles that they're facing, and challenges, and successes, as well, clearly. And um, but I anchor myself, and root myself, along with my coaching practice, inside of a couple pillars. One of which is curiosity, mastery, um, autotelicity, like I'd mentioned, before. What is it that you love to do? What is it that you can do all day, all night, and never get paid for? Because we all have talents. We just have to identify what those are, um, and not take a job just to pay, the rent, so to speak. And oftentimes you have to do that too, right? Because we're sacrificial in nature, and if you have mouths to feed and you want to feed yourself, you're going to have to make sacrifices. But ultimately, if you want to live the best life possible, you have to lean into your curiosities and figure out what it is that you could do forever and not get paid, and find a way to make a living out of that. um, Identify your purpose. um, and then a few other pillars is, from an intrinsic standpoint, because if you're motivated intrinsically, that's sustainable over time, because there is no peak to one's success. I mean, a lot of people think like, here, I set a goal. Once I accomplish that goal, I have the trophy, let's say, whatever that may be. But then what do? You set another goal for yourself, and you set another goal, and then you set another goal. And as long as it's an upwards aim, um, you're never stopping. We're always learning. We're always growing. And that's in an effort to be as good of a person as you can be, not as nice of a person as you can be. Those are different from a root
Yeah, I was about
level.
to ask you,
Nice
what are the
versus
difference?
good. Well, if you're nice, and you can chat GPT this too from a psychological standpoint. Like the message in the world now is being nice, and you're fine the way you are. And it's like, no, I'm not fine the way I am, currently am. And nice is superficial. It's people pleasing. It's self-sacrificing. It is saying yes more than you say no. And over the course of time, that breeds resentment and contempt. And then you ask yourself what happens. Well, that explodes. The person can't take it anymore. Think of the person who's always saying yes, always opening the door for other people because they're nice. Well, over time, they find that people aren't opening the same amount of doors for them as they do for others, and they get resentful. And then it explodes on those closest to them because they know them best. But if you're good, that's comprehensive. The aim of being good nestles itself inside of morals, ethics, purpose, understanding of the self, the ability to make tough decisions, which means you're not always going to be liked.
Or
And
nice.
it has leadership qualities to it. It has a backbone to it. But being nice is, everything has an opposite, right? So the opposite of nice is unpleasant, and we certainly do not live in Unpleasantville. The world is wicked, and once you understand that the world is wicked with good people inside of it, therefore you can live free, like you had mentioned before: discipline, freedom, the adventure of life, and everything else, right? And if you're good, you also carry with you the ability to cause harm. And I believe that every man walking this earth should have the ability to cause harm. I'm not saying do it, but I'm saying that if you don't have a backbone to you, and don't have the ability to say no, then people will walk on you, not on purpose. They're just going to stomp on you. Especially, the difference between two men having a conversation face to face, the underlying tension of that can always become physical. And so there's a tension inside of a conversation when two men get together. And if that threat, and you can see it in the eyes too, if that threat from the other person of, you're not going to mess with me in this conversation, a great negotiation is where both parties leave the table feeling like they won. So it has to be balanced and ethically driven. However, if you and I are having a conversation and if I'm Mr. Nice Guy, you can walk all over me. There's not a mutual respect. And men and women, the conversation, that's not there, right? That's why women win a lot of these conversations, because
Happy wife,
that
happy
element
life.
that element of it becoming physical is not there. So I think the aim for people is to be comprehensively good, and to, especially men, and to carry a sword on their hip that's sharp on both sides, and they know when to use it. It's like I'm really aggressive, and then you learn how to tame it.
One of the things that I took from that too is a line that I love to use being in leadership is, don't mistake my kindness for weakness.
Yeah,
And
there
I
you go.
think that is something really important to remember when it comes for that difference between good and nice,
Yeah,
because we are in this world right now where I think there's a clear difference between people that are nice and people that do good, but also have that backbone to say no when need be. It doesn't mean it
yeah,
needs to be 100% one way or the other, but it's really important. And I'm glad you went down that path and talked about that. Speaking of just personal transformations, what are some common themes that you see the most with? Maybe it is good versus nice with your clients, but what else do you see as common themes that they're going through on a day-to-day basis that they're looking for growth out of or from?
yeah. One that comes to mind immediately is people can write down what it is that they want, but following through on it is quite a challenge, because it's I don't have time, type of excuses, and it's closing the loop. So it's making your bed in the morning because it's the first thing that you complete in the day. So it's closing the loop. At a root level, if you start something, finish it, and start as small as possible. I find great humility in starting as small as possible, because if we feel as though we can jump steps, that's our ego and our pride sitting on our shoulder. And I already know, or I've already done that before, so I don't have to do it again. And um, getting people to close the loop, complete what it is that you start, again, is that positive feedback loop. And that starts creating momentum. And then before you know it, they're doing much bigger things pretty quickly too, because it feels good to complete something, and it feels good to work through and push through the frustration, that burn in the chest that we all get when we sit down. But then we get into flow too, which is an interesting piece of our brain, right? Where we lose concept of the self, and we're fully immersed in the task at hand, and
The flow
everything else,
state.
the flow state. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And Stephen Kotler's a big leader in that. The
Yeah.
Flow State Research Lab, I believe it is. But yeah, I'd say one thing is closing the loop. Another is emotional intelligence, meaning like identifying how you feel and not acting on it immediately, right? And that's in once somebody can become an intuitive thinker. I just wrote a little blurb on this in social media about um, becoming an intuitive thinker, because listening to your intuition rarely will steer you wrong, especially as you have more years underneath you. Um, I'm not dismissing intellect whatsoever, but um, leaning into your intuition, should I do this or should I not? And then, you know, um,
How do you lean into your intuition?
I believe that writing, intentional journaling solves a lot of people's issues. Um, with old school sheet of paper, not typing, not voicing it into your phone, sitting down for 10 minutes whenever you can, and just write about what you want. What do I want? What do I, in 5 years, if I could have anything I want and become anybody I want, what does that look like? And get inside of that, and what you'll find is your life will start to change, because when you start acting as if you actually can become this person, this avatar, your future self, um, great things will happen for you. And I believe that. I believe it starts in the morning for me, journaling, um, reading, reading interesting educational topics that you're curious to learn more about. Um, And that's that curiosity piece, you know. For me, it
Yeah.
happens to be psychology and human behavior and why it is that we do what we do. So closing the loop, leaning into your intuition by writing, figuring out, and it's a feeling, you know, when we are in tune with the feeling, because we perceive before it is, there's like a roughly a 7-second delay between what it is that I see, should I or should I not do it? There's a feeling inside of us, and then I'm able to, um, over time, objectively evaluate what it is that I may or may not embark on, and then I can make an educated choice.
Yeah.
And so there's a slowdown effect to it that I think people feel, is what I hear. I certainly feel it.
Do you
Is
meditate too?
I do, yeah. And I view meditation, mindfulness, visualization. Um, there's a lot of overlaps, you know,
Yeah.
in
Big
those.
time.
What about you? Do you meditate at all?
I do. I try to do 10 minutes every single day in the morning, part of my morning routine. A lot of your yeah, I feel like I'm just regurgitating exactly what you said because I do a lot of it myself. But my morning routine is journaling, meditation, getting an exercise in, and some fresh sunlight, not looking at my phone first thing, to where I have someone else's problems or just thoughts on my mind then before my own thoughts. So I think that's all super important to do that type of stuff. Give back to yourself. Going back to your point of good versus nice, be good to yourself is something that I think is super powerful for anybody that's trying to change, get out of their comfort zone of anything that they're in. So yeah, I try to keep it a daily routine of meditation because it in this world where we're just moving nonstop. To
Oh
going
yeah,
back to your ball playing days, film, like you're moving nonstop. So when you do stop, it feels weird. Like it's still if I do meditation at the end of my day versus the start, I feel weird at the end of the day because I'm like, why are you stop? My brain's saying, why are you stopping? Keep going, keep going,
yeah,
keep going.
yeah.
So taking that time to pause before I do anything allows me then to reflect as I'm going through my day and um, answering people, meetings, things like that. The other point of what you brought up that I thought was very interesting was responses with people and like getting a response from someone and instantly reacting to it. Like right now, we have our cell phones. We have Slack if you're within a company or Google or whatever we're calling Teams, things like that, where everybody's expecting an email, everybody's expecting an answer immediately. Like, what is the problem in taking a little bit of time just to think about what you want to respond with before you have an emotional reaction? It's funny, with an emotional reaction, that's less EQ than taking the time to think about it, then responding.
Right. Yeah. And that also kind of feathers into another key component to positively changing or pivoting or altering the course of one's life is the delayed gratification, right? And that in a way goes into those responses because we're expected, and that's an implicit type contract, right? When you go to get your food, that's an implicit contract because you pay after you eat. And then you have the explicit contract, right? So, and then we have implicit memory and explicit memory as well. And so when
Mm.
you factor in delayed gratification, the want versus the need, and then let's think of business, you can set the tone straight away if you can just gain some perspective and take an hour, write a rule down for yourself. Again, journaling, writing.
Mm.
Um, how long will it take for you to respond to an email? And a lot of companies will have protocols, right, within 24 hours, same day, et cetera.
Sure.
So that I'm not talking about that. I'm speaking about for the person
Yeah.
and the individual. When you feel like you're in control and you're not at somebody else's mercy, right? We feel compelled to respond to a text right away. But
Always.
even if you don't have anything going in your life, just take a moment, take an hour to respond, because interestingly, it creates a demand. It creates a demand for you, for your attention. And it also allows you time to think, and that's delaying your own instinct to respond right away. And then in terms of what you want in your life, right? When you think about purchases we make, if you delay those, like I have a rule in my life where if I can't buy it twice, I don't buy it once. So if I can't, and then
I
I
love
take
that.
2 or 3 days. And so if I can't purchase, I don't know, let's use a watch as an example. If I can't pay cash for the watch and buy two of them and not even sweat, then I don't buy it to begin with. And that's really helped my life, for me to understand the big and the small things that I put in my life, because previous to me overcoming the most serious challenge in my life, I was chasing things, and I wanted to acquire things. And now I live a rather minimalistic type lifestyle because every single thing that we own in our life requires maintenance. And no matter what it is, you have something hanging on your wall. Well, you've got to dust it. Everything requires maintenance. And so if we can delay our pleasure, delay our purchases, delay the responses to people via email, via text message, etc. That's discipline, and it creates freedom.
We are in such an instant gratification world.
Oh,
Everything.
everywhere. Social media has been, it's fractured society. It has, and now AI. AI is a separate challenge, I suppose, and I don't think anybody's really clear on what the world's going to look like in a year or 5 years. All
Even
that, but
6 months, it's
yeah,
the speed of it is insane.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think the thing with social media where it really shifted society was when it went to the mobile, when it went to
yeah,
the phone. Before it went to the phone, I don't think there was as big of an issue. It was more internet 1.0 at that point, and then
yeah,
we went to internet 2.0. Now and I'm being subjective when it comes to saying 1.0, 2.0. Some people will say it's completely different, but now we're going into the AI days where I had somebody on the podcast a couple weeks ago talking about this and where they're bullish on with it, and it's pretty remarkable just the different areas that it's impacting. And I do see a lot of good with it, just as much as anything. There's good and bad, just like
yeah,
social media. There's good and bad. It allows people to
yeah,
connect, find like-minded people and things like that.
yeah,
But I think just like with anything, it's how are you using it? Are you
yeah,
abusing
right.
it or using it in a
Or is it
in a
using you?
or is it using you?
Yeah.
Great point. So I want to shift back real quick because I love film. I always have since I was a little kid. Where did the love for producing films really come from with type A people around you your whole life and being in an athletic background?
Yeah, I had been. I wasn't in tune publicly, let's just say, like with my buddies growing up and my parents and what have you, with my creativity, and I didn't really realize it. I guess maybe it's the left-handedness in me. But I would always write and I would always draw, and I was attracted to music. And then as I got older, um, I just would watch movies over, every single night. I was watching movies. I would watch some ESPN, Sports Center, and all that. But I'd say I was torn between sport and art. And then I was in a little movie called uh, Little Man Tate, not a little movie. Jodie Foster was in it, and I had this
Mm,
little extra role, and I ended up having a speaking uh, line in it, and I was enthralled. Like the movie set felt to me like a baseball field in a way,
yeah.
like it's performance oriented, and that it always. And then I grew. I'm 6'4" and 6'4", 6'5", and sports took over my life. And then when I moved to Arizona for spring trainings, I would tap into LA, and I got a little sense of Hollywood, as an outsider would call it. And then as I got older, I knew. I was just like, man, when I get done with baseball, I'm moving to LA. the Chicago White Sox were paying for my college. I'm going to sell my condo. I'm going to rent. I'm going to sell my business. I'm moving out west, and I don't know how I'm going to get in. But I took the approach of like, I know Steven Spielberg is not going to come knocking on my door, so I'll find his and blow the hinges off. Um, and so I took a very aggressive approach into the industry and started knocking on doors, basically sales agents and agents. And I wrote a script that got produced. And that was my first feature film. But I also, I produced it and wrote it with Brianna. And yeah, I mean, the film industry is not for the faint of heart. I mean, LA will chew you up and spit you out. It'll charge you 2 cents for your soul and then ask for it back. So yeah, that's a cutthroat industry. It's a sink or swim as well. And there's a lot of, you have to create your own opportunities.
Fully agree with you. And there is something that you said, going and knocking on doors. As we mentioned before we were recording, I had a stint of doing acting too, with doing a couple commercials, independent films, and that's really how it was. Like I was out east most of the time and was out west for a little bit, but it's really just knocking on doors and being relentless about it. And I think that's where sales ended up coming into play with me, where it's like there's no don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness with it.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a big thing with me of how I got my agent, and even in the door with the independent films, it was, oh, you're not inviting me? I'll just invite myself and
Yeah.
I'll make it work out. And granted, that isn't the play for most people, but we're not most people. So I guess that
No.
is another play you could talk about. But yeah, still with film for a little bit, I got to ask you, what were the ones that inspired you growing up, or ones that were your favorites? Nothing's off the table here.
Yeah. I loved movies like Jurassic Park,
Mm.
that I would watch all the time. And then I ended up doing a movie called Undrafted with Joe Mazzello, who was a young
Oh,
kid in
cool.
that show. Yeah. And movies like For the Love of the Game with Kevin Costner and
Hmm.
his motif in a way of clear the mechanism when that's a baseball movie when he's on the mound. And
Yeah.
um, I love movies to the extent, all the movies I produce, I'm genre agnostic. So I've shot
Mm.
horror films, I've shot comedies like Blue Mountain State. I did a drama called Night Train to Lisbon. I did a quirky
One of my
little
favorite
comedy.
shows,
What's that?
Blue Mountain
Oh
State.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
coming back.
I heard.
Yeah.
Are you a part of it?
No, I'm not. That's a TV show. I'm in the feature film world. So I shot the movie. Alan is a buddy of mine
Okay.
who plays Thad, and
Yeah.
Romansky and those guys, Eric Faulkner, the two writers, the creators of the show,
Yeah.
great people. And then Burns, who did
Hmm.
all of our set design. Yeah, great folks. But yeah, so I took the approach like growing up, the movies. I didn't have really one movie that launched my interest in it. I always thought to myself like, how do they do that? How do they do that? And then once I got into the industry, I found out because I started getting producers coffee, and then I had some stints on a couple shows as an actor, and started taking a lot of acting classes. But I'd say that it's a great question. What influenced me the most? It was wondering how they made these movies.
Mm.
How they took something
The
from script to
magic.
screen, the magic behind Hollywood. I was enthralled with it,
Yeah.
similar as I was with baseball. I wanted to be on the big stage.
It's funny you
Um,
mention Jurassic Park too, because Jurassic Park was the first movie I saw in theaters as a 4-year-old.
okay,
I'm
yeah,
35. I saw that in theaters when I was 4 years old. Probably explains a lot why I am in my life, but it's such a powerful film, not just because it's about dinosaurs and it attracts young kids, but also the feeling that you get watching that movie. I remember when they started the reboot with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard. I forget who else is in the movie, but we got out of the theater. It was the first Jurassic World that they came back out with, my wife and I. And I said, I'm like, I liked it, but it doesn't give you that same feel that the original one does.
Yeah,
And
no, it's hard to,
my wife
yeah.
said, what do you mean? And we got in the car and I pulled my phone out and I just put the phone up on the dash and I pulled the T-Rex scene up and I just turned up the volume and we were just watching on this little screen in my car. Just the feel when those wires are getting, where's the goat? The sound, like all
Yeah,
those little pieces and the eeriness and and I'm like, this is not replicable. This is Spielberg. This is different. This is an energy. And to your point of like the power of certain films and how they can do that to you, it is remarkable. Like
yeah.
Dark Knight is another one for
Dark
me that
Knight, yeah, I like Dark
has
Knight, yeah.
has really influenced a lot. But yeah, uh, I digress. I could go down
Well,
a
not really. I
deep
mean,
rabbit. Yeah.
I mean, you ask yourself, like, why do we go to movies, right? We go to movies and we watch TV shows to escape.
Mm,
And, and, I felt my job as a producer is to tease out emotion
mm,
through storytelling and through the
yeah.
music and through the plot and et cetera. And then we all relate to a character. We may relate to the pro or antagonist or what have you, but we see the world through their lens. And
Mm,
there's an escape to that um, the if I do a bad job of producing a movie, nobody feels anything. I want them to feel hate, rage, anger, happy, sad, love. Um,
mm,
I want them to feel maybe, um, confusion. I mean, any type of emotion. And that's why and it sounds like you too, fell in
mm.
love with movies. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, how do they do that? I want to do that too.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's dreaming. That's that spirit of play as a kid.
Yeah.
Um, that oftentimes um, we forget about because we go to high school, we go to college in the traditional sense. We go to college, we get a job, we meet somebody, and before you know it, you have a mortgage and a kid,
Mm,
and you're just trying to survive.
very much so. It's a tough cycle to break out of because it requires one being uncomfortable to do something different, and people hate being uncomfortable, whether it's their daily routine or managing their time correctly or being productive in a day. It's tough getting out of and trying new things that you're not used to because you're going against the grain when you do that. But I personally have always felt that I feel more fulfilled when I am going against the grain within my confines, even
Yeah.
whatever it is, because that's just a part of the growth path. I want to touch on your podcast for a minute and talk about Intrinsic Podcast. What do listeners expect when they come to your podcast? Because I would love for everybody that's listening to this to go check yours out as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It's it's a hybrid model, I'd say. I'm
Hmm.
not somebody to niche down inside of just one certain
Yeah.
topic and just hammer that thing all day. I find that to be really boring.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a combination of folks, professional athletes, high performers, actors, entertainers, who have overcome significant obstacles in their life. So it's how'd you do it stories, and then I commingle that with the experts, the authors, the speakers in the world of functional health and wellness and life transformation. Right. So um, movement, rest, nutrition, mindfulness, intrinsic motivators,
Mm,
and so it provides, I think, like a web of support for people who are looking to improve their life amongst various different spokes, right, of which they can achieve. And so, yeah, I've had people on, I've had neuroscience, and it's a younger podcast too. So I'm really just getting started here.
yeah.
I just released another one this morning from a professional athlete who um, uh, was addicted, and I had to overcome significant, obstacles. A number of pro athletes and neuroscientists, and I just interviewed a woman who's a leader in psychedelics, which is a growing field, which I find interesting in terms of
Oh yeah.
healing from trauma and depression and addiction and anxiety, et cetera. I think that that um, that method is I think going to be more readily available to people who need it under
Yeah.
under under supervised guidance. But I'm leaning into my curiosities too, similar to yourself. I'm trying to find the most interesting people in the world to have conversations with, and help inspire others to really realize and understand that if you get good sleep, if you limit your sugar, if you the you can avoid a lot of these chronic diseases, and you can live a really good life if you just take a little bit of action. And so my
Mm.
podcast is just building my side of the bridge and cleaning my side of the street in an attempt to bring folks on who can share their story, their trials, their triumphs, what they've learned along the way. And
Have
then,
you have you
go ahead.
have you sorry, I was going to say, have you read Outlive?
I have, yeah, Peter T. I love it, man. That's
Incredible.
a
Yeah.
phenomenal book, and I find that to be. What did you like it?
I did. I think well, my wife is an RN.
Oh yeah,
Ironic.
okay.
Yeah, so and funny enough, she was actually I ended up on her unit when I had my brain surgery.
Oh
So she's a
wow,
but that's not how we met. We've been together for years, but a lot in the book is there's a lot of stuff I couldn't even pronounce. And
yeah,
I'm like, her name's Katie.
yeah,
I'm like, Katie, what's this? And she'll explain it to me, and then I'll go back to reading. And but I did like the book a lot. I think those four horsemen are really what catch up with all of us at some point in our lives. And the more we can prolong that and have not just stay alive. I think there's a difference between staying alive and being alive. And that is like I took so much from that book, just from how to prevent that and really live a fulfilled life with that discipline of being in good health.
yeah. Right. I mean, when you fast forward your life, and you go into the last decade of your life, like he mentions in the book, it's like, what do you want to be doing when you're 80, 90 years old? Because there's no
Right.
such thing as a sudden heart attack either. That heart disease has been working on you for decades, and now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you fall over from a heart attack. It's like, man, that's not the way it works. His theory is medicine 3.0,
Yep.
and which is getting taking action on your health as early as possible.
Mm.
Because what really helped me go overcome my struggles, and coincidentally his book really hammers this home, is when I always had in my brain, like at a very young age, is, man, I do not want to be 65 years old. I don't know how I came up with that number, but that's what's been in my head my whole life. I don't want to be 65 years old and look back in the rearview mirror and say, I should have done this. I should have done this. I should not have done. Like,
Mm.
I wanted my life to be full,
Yeah.
and full of action. And I think because I saw so much, I'm 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 extremely observant, and how people, like, I look at the tread of the tire at a four-way intersection. I don't look at the whole car, and I look at the little quiver in the lip and the touches of the fingers to evaluate somebody and how I should approach them, let's say. But um, I never wanted to look back and say I should have done this, 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 and this. And that book really helps people understand. Like, if you so throughout my healing processes, I fast forwarded my life all the way to the end and say, all right, well,
Mm.
what do I want to be doing? What am I dying from? Who's around me? Who do I want? Like, what kind of legacy am I going to be leaving? And the book Outlive, he does a great job of that. Like, what do you want to be doing in the last decade of your life? And then you back yourself into where you are today, and you
Reverse.
talk about an aha moment. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not going to have that type of sugar anymore. I'm going to have this when I get a sweet tooth, because if I'm going to die, it's not going to be from something that I know I should not be doing. And that's discipline. And when you have
Yeah.
that, when you take that approach, man, that's the ultimate freedom.
It's all connected, as you
It's all
mentioned, the
connected.
sleep, the nutrition, the stress. your overall health. It all goes back to what you put into your body and how you exert your body as well. And I think we are at such a beautiful point right now with information. As much as we have information overload, I do think that more people are informed than ever on how can you actually adjust your life in a positive form than just a get healthy quick scheme. And they are out there still. There's tons of them. But at the same time, there is people waking up to what I can do on my own without having to be reliant on external forces to get myself to where I need to be at. So yeah, it's cool that you read that book too. That's one that sticks on the shelf. I mean, I got a lot back here,
Oh
but
yeah, I love it. I've got it right over here too. And it's like
yeah,
Good Energy is another book. Read
yeah,
Meditations, Marcus Aurelius.
phenomenal.
Because you're in tune with death. When you're in tune with death, you're also in tune with life because you're grateful.
Mm.
You're grateful.
You can't,
Like
yeah,
Marcus Aurelius. I mean, people. We walk around like we don't see death on the street every day, but there's wars all over the place,
mm.
and there are women who can only show but just their eyes, or else they're killed. Like us Americans, we don't realize that we live in a very sheltered environment, and we
Bubble.
think we're in some ways better than the rest of the world. And I think once, I learned this through reading the Stoics. I mean, when you're in tune with nature and the universe, and you realize that you only have one life to live. I mean, Marcus Aurelius would every night he lost a lot of children. There's the plague and there's the war, and he's this emperor or emperor. He's the ruler, and um, he would lay his kids down and say like a little prayer over top of their head because it might be the last time he ever sees his kids. And when you take that sort of approach to life, it allows you to slow down, appreciate everything around you, be grateful, and lead a life of sacrifice and service and love and
Being present too.
appreciation and
Being
humility.
present too. Yeah, being
Being
present
present.
too is a big thing, and I think a lot of people do struggle with that, whether it's the
Yeah,
past and being stressed about that, or the future and being anxious about it.
yeah,
And I love this quote of the past is history, the future is a mystery, and the present is a gift. So
yeah, right. Yeah,
leave it that way. So Eric, I've absolutely loved this episode and having you on. Last question for you. Where can listeners follow you, tune into your stuff, website, social handles, everything above? Because you're beyond inspiring, and I know a lot of people that do listen to this would love to follow your journey.
yeah, sure. I appreciate it. I try to keep it as simple as possible. It's just my full name, Eric Mark Fischer. That's my Instagram and Facebook. Um, And the podcast is the Intrinsic Podcast, and you can find that by typing in my full name, and alongside that, you'll find, movies I've done, and my website is ericmarkfisher.com. So pretty straightforward right there.
Easy enough, and I'll make sure to put it
Yeah,
in our bios for everything as well, and descriptions. But I do actually have one more question. How do you define 1% better?
being a little bit better each day, being 1% better today than you were yesterday, and being able to measure it, building a system that where you can measure it. And a great way to measure it is to journal and carry a little journal with you everywhere you go and get your thoughts down on paper.
Amazing. Eric, can't thank you enough for doing this. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll have to do it again sometime for sure, because I think we only scratched the surface with a number of these topics.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'd love to come back on and build this relationship. So thank you again for having me on.
You got it. All right, everybody. That's another episode of 1% Better. Take care.